Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Department of Housing, Addictions and Homelessness. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement?
I do.
The Honourable Minister.
Miigwech, Honourable Chair, on behalf of Housing, Addictions and Homelessness, I'm pleased to present the 26-27 financial estimates. Budget 2026 reflects our government's continued commitment to lowering costs for Manitobans, strengthening communities and ensuring Manitobans can have access to safe housing and supports to ensure their success. The investments outlined in our government's budgets are a direct response to the challenges Manitobans face every day related to housing, homelessness, mental health, and addictions. These issues are complex and interconnected and are rooted in history and systemic racism. There are no simple solutions, but we are committed to doing the work with compassion and in partnership with communities and service providers. Budget 2026 builds on the work already underway through Your Way Home strategy, Manitoba's plan to end chronic homelessness. It demonstrates our government's ongoing commitment as a person-centered, evidence-based approach to care, with a commitment to truth and reconciliation and providing meaningful support to Indigenous-led solutions. This year's budget includes new investments to support people moving from encampments and shelters into safe, affordable housing. Almost $9 million in investments will go toward the expansion of transitional and supportive housing for people exiting encampments. Our government has also made a commitment to the ongoing development of a navigation centre, where people exiting encampments, hospitals, or other institutions will be directly connected to housing and supports in their community. By doing so, we will help to reduce the strains on healthcare and the justice system. Our government recognizes that we cannot make progress on ending chronic homelessness without addressing the critical shortage of social and affordable housing. Budget 2026 invests $12.8 million in funding to support the creation of up to 215 new social and affordable housing units across the province. We have and continue to make generational investments like 447 Webb. Members across the way never built or purchased one single unit of social housing in their 7.5 years of government. We know we need a continuum of housing needs, and we are continuing to offer incentives. This includes a commitment of up to $176.5 million to support rental housing construction through to 2020 or 2030 under the rental housing construction incentive, with enhanced benefits available for housing. This includes $13,500 for affordable units and $8,500 for market rent units. This is in stark contrast to our predecessors, the members across the way, who sold off social housing and boarded up Manitoba Housing, our crown jewel, causing hundreds of Manitobans to end up homeless. Honourable Chair, we understand that for many Manitobans exiting homelessness, securing housing is just the first step. Individuals need supports to heal, address trauma, and build skills to succeed. Budget 2026 strengthens wraparound supports in new and existing housing units, helping to ensure people exiting homelessness are set up for long-term success and stability. Our efforts to increase the supply of social and affordable housing through new construction will be successful only if we protect what we already have. Budget 2026 includes significant investments to repair and maintain provincially owned social housing, ensuring these homes remain safe, dignified, and affordable for Manitobans who rely on them. Once again, I'd like to put on the record that it is our government, when we came into office, one of our first actions was to invest in Manitoba Housing, pulling the plywood off the windows that the previous government boarded up, ensuring that Manitobans had a safe, dignified place that they could call home. It is this government that values housing as an essential public asset, supports safer communities, and works to maintain affordability today while continuing to grow the social and affordable housing supply. Honourable Chair, this is a generational investment. Our government recognizes the harms and risks associated with homelessness. They are immediate, and we are responding to these urgent needs. Budget 2026 invests nearly $1.8 million in immediate supports for people experiencing homelessness, meeting people where they are at and providing timely assistance when individuals need it most. Our government remains committed to building a compassionate, inclusive mental health system with addiction supports that prioritizes dignity, safety, and recovery. This year's budget strengthens investments in harm reduction, outreach, and stabilization supports for people navigating mental health and substance use challenges. It's important that we interconnect between mental health and addictions and homelessness, that are recognized that our work reflects this. We continue to work closely with partners across government and with community to expand treatment, recovery, and navigation supports, ensuring Manitobans can access help when and where they need it. Our investments build on and complement broader investments across government. By working alongside our partners in health, justice, families, and other departments, we're ensuring that the issues related to housing, homelessness, mental health, and addictions are addressed through a coordinated whole-of-government approach. The most efficient way to address homelessness is prevention. As the cost of living continues to rise, more Manitobans are under pressure to make ends meet. Budget 2026 responds to these realities through a broad range of affordability measures, including increasing the Renters Affordability Tax Credit, removing the PST from all food purchases at grocery stores, making transit for young people free, and enhancing supports for seniors and people with disabilities. These measures play a critical role in the response to homelessness, stabilizing households and preventing homelessness before it occurs. They target seniors, families, and Manitobans living with disabilities, who are among our most vulnerable. Again, this is in contrast to what Manitobans experienced under the previous failed government. During a cost of living crisis and global pandemic, the members opposite were nowhere to be found. This government works on reducing costs for families and supporting Manitobans, unlike members opposite who didn't respond and left Manitobans. Our government's budget is balanced and compassionate, one that responds to immediate needs of Manitobans, one that continues to build a system, one that continues to build partnerships, one that continues to build housing supply for long-term, sustainable change, generational change. This is challenging. It's hard. It's complex, hard work. And we recognize that there's still much more to do, but we're up for the challenge. We're up for working with our partners. That's why we continue to work with our federal partners, our municipal partners, our community partners, and we are working to ensure that those individuals' needs are met. Our government remains committed to listening to Manitobans, to learning from community, and taking action to make a meaningful difference in people's lives right here and across our province. I want to thank all of those organizations that are on the front line each and every day that are working to ensure Manitobans are housed, that they're getting their mental health needs met, that they are ensuring that those that are struggling with substance use, that they are met with compassion, and that we are keeping them alive enough to connect them with care, and that we are, as a government here to work alongside you, to ensure that we are taking a balanced approach, because we can't treat people if they are not alive. And we knew that coming into government, we had to create a new ministry, and we heard from Manitobans how important it was to meet people where they were at and to create an environment, an ecosystem where people could do well and get on a path of success. And then that's exactly what our government is doing. Miigwech.
We thank the minister for those comments. Does the critic of the official opposition have an opening statement?
Yes, thank you.
The member for Portage La Prairie.
Thank you. Honorable Chair, I believe I refer to you as. Is that correct? Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Just a couple things to say before we get started off. And then I think it's important that we get into the questions on this as quickly as possible. I took over the chair or the critic's position of addictions, homelessness, and Manitoba housing over the last number of months. And I spent a lot of time over in the Point Douglas area and other parts of Manitoba, hearing in my own community of Portage La Prairie about the issues that were going on in Manitoba housing facilities. And it turned out that the people in the Manitoba housing facilities helped to make change there. It was referred to that there was over $5 million spent on one of the Manitoba housing facilities in Portage La Prairie. And when we FIP'd it, it turned out to be $21,000. So again, this is what we're talking about here. When we look at what's going on with housing and addictions right now, we just heard yesterday the amount of people that we're seeing that are homeless right now are at absolutely record numbers. In a country like ours, in a province like ours, this should not be happening. We have not seen this government do anything to encourage or make that better in any way, shape, or form. We've seen consultations happening. We've seen announcements happening and absolutely no plans. So I look forward to asking some of these questions. So not only can we give it to all of the public, but so I can go back to the people of Point Douglas, the people that are worried about their businesses, the people that are worried about their homes, and the people that are worried that they're being kicked out of a place with nowhere to go. And I can tell them the answers to these questions I'm looking for. Thank you.
We thank the member. Under Manitoba practice, debate on the minister's salary is the last item considered for a department in the Committee of Supply. My apologies, I skipped. Oh no, sorry, there we go. I'll start that again. Under Manitoba practice, a debate on the minister's salary is the last item considered for a department in the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 24.1A contained in resolution 24.1. At this time, we now invite the minister's staff to join us at the table, and we ask that the minister introduce the staff in attendance. The Honourable Minister.
Miigwech, Honourable Chair. So I'd like to introduce the staff that are here with me supporting my amazing team here. So first I'd like to introduce Carolina Stetcher, who is my Director of Ministerial Affairs. Carolina, prior to joining Housing Addictions and Homelessness in January 2025, was a Director in Labour and Immigration. She has over 25 years of political and organizing experience, working as an assistant formerly to a city councillor, a member of parliament, and served with 10 different cabinet ministers and 3 different NDP governments. Quite the experience. Caroline has also worked in the nonprofit charitable sector in community engagement and as a senior researcher and writer for a major funder here in Winnipeg. She has extensive organizing experience and holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Winnipeg. And next to her is Charlene Paquin. Charlene is the Deputy Minister in my department. She joined us in March of 2025. She started her public service career as a practicum student in Veteran Affairs in the public service in 2001, where she spent over 20 years with the province. She then became a policy analyst and spent 15 years with the Department of Families, including as the Executive Director of Employment and Income Assistance Programs and Assistant Deputy Minister for EIA, Disability Programs, and Early Learning in Childhood. She also served as the Manitoba Ombudsman before taking on the role of Civil Service Commissioner. Quite the resume. She was a Deputy Minister for Sport, Culture and Heritage and Associate Clerk for Public Service Transformation. So 3 years prior to her recent appointment, Charlene was with Deloitte Canada, where she worked specifically with government and public sector organizations across various provinces with a strong focus on human and social services. Charlene holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Sociology and Justice and Law Enforcement from the University of Winnipeg and a Master's in Social Work with Policy Planning and Administration from the University of Manitoba. And then down second from the end is Brian Malkovich. Brian Malkovich started his career with the Manitoba government 36 years ago, and he's an ADM and has served in a variety of senior roles with social services and has been, the COO and ADM for 2 years. Brian has a track record of working and is an integral service environment dealing with complex situations and collaborating with numerous stakeholders on a variety of intricate issues to achieve positive outcomes. His many years of experience in program management, service delivery, and fiscal responsibility has been a valuable contribution that really helps take strategic priorities and turns them into operational business plans. And when I first met Brian, I was coming for a tour and meeting staff, and people were coming in to pay their rent, and they were like, knew Brian by his first name. And when I was coming for tours of buildings, people were coming up to Brian and knew Brian by his first name. So just speaks to the level of relationship that he creates with folks that are living in Manitoba housing. Carolyn Ryan, who's over here beside our Deputy Minister, started with the Manitoba government in 1999 and joined Manitoba Housing as a senior policy analyst in 2004, and she just celebrated 25 years with our government, so she's been working really hard. And since then, she has served in a variety of leadership roles within the corporation, including in housing, delivery, portfolio management, strategic initiatives, and operation. She's been the CEO, so Chief Executive Officer of the Manitoba Housing, and Assistant Deputy Minister in the Department of Housing, Addictions, Homelessness since 2023. Carolyn also sits on the board of End Homelessness Winnipeg. She's a graduate of the University of Manitoba. Carolyn has a Bachelor of Arts degree in Economics and a Bachelor of Social Work and a Master of Social Work, a Master of Social Work. Carolyn's married and is a proud mother of 2 daughters, and I go and watch them perform at Folklorama every year. So, Heather, who is, she's just raised her hand. Heather joined us recently, although I met her in the sector working in mental health. She joined Manitoba Department of Housing as a Deputy Assistant Minister as Mental Health and Addictions Division on June 2nd, 2025. She has over 25 years of leading and working within the community-based organizations across Manitoba, and most recently as Executive Director of Heartwood Healing Center, and that's where I first met her. Heather's vast experience and knowledge from her time working with community organizations really was an important and is an important asset in her current role within our department. She leads the development of provincial policy, service, and system planning in the areas of treatment and continued care related to mental health and addictions, harm reductions, and support for children and youth. And then we have Rob just over here. Just raise your hand, Rob. Rob has been with the government for over 35 years, providing guidance and advice in both programming and finance for multiple departments. He began his career in 1990 as a fisheries biologist in the natural resources sector, where he led programs related to Indigenous, commercial, and recreational fisheries throughout the province. And no, Mr. Bushy, you cannot steal him. With his knowledge, or Minister Bushy.
I apologize for the interruption, Honourable Minister. We just need to refer to everyone in this committee room by their ministerial title or constituency, and through the chair. Apologize for the interruption. The Honourable Minister.
I apologize for that. With his knowledge and experience in resource planning, he turned his attention to the finance part of government to work with both internal and external partners to secure the necessary resources to implement a number of government-wide initiatives. So over this past year and a half, Rob has been involved in coordinating the department's finance and corporate services section by supporting high-profile public-facing programs for the benefits of all Manitobans. So we're very lucky to have him on our team, as we are everyone I've introduced so far. And then we have Dwayne right beside him, Roniak, who is the Acting Assistant Deputy Minister and also the Chief Executive Officer of Manitoba Housing and Renewal Corporation. So Dwayne joined the department in 2001 and has over 25 years of housing experience, including 17 years of managing in a senior level environment. Dwayne brings strong background knowledge in various housing specializations, including housing policy and programs, social and affordable housing delivery models, asset management, land management, and intergovernmental relationships. And again, anywhere I go, everyone just speaks highly of this team and how they work collaboratively to ensure that Manitobans, whether it's working towards meeting Manitobans where they're at with their mental health, addictions, housing, or getting housing built, this team has worked incredibly hard to ensure that those folks are getting their needs met. And I did miss one member of our team, Jorge, who, where is Jorge? You didn't put your own resume in here. So Jorge's, yes, you left your own resume out. So Jorge joined me also in March of 2025 and is my special advisor, or my special assistant, and he works very closely with me and does amazing work and keeps me on task. So I want to thank him for the work that he does as well. And he works alongside Carolyn and myself. So this is a team that supports me and supports the work and supports Manitobans. And I just want to lift the work up that you're doing, civil servants, but also our political team as well. You do such incredible work to support Manitobans, whether that's, again, around mental health, addictions, getting more housing built, or getting those folks that are homeless or that need, making sure that those folks aren't exiting to homeless prevention work. You're doing incredible work, and I just want to lift you all up. But those that aren't even here, I also want to lift lift up the civil servants that are doing amazing work across our sector.
We thank the minister. According to Rule 7816, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner, with questions put separately on all resolutions once the official opposition critic indicates that questioning has concluded. The floor is now open for questions. The member for Portage La Prairie.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. First of all, welcome everybody that's here today. I appreciate your bios and that, but we have a ton of questions that we want to ask here. So I want to get moving on this. First of all, I just wanted to make sure that this is the official booklet for supplements of estimates for Manitoba housing, addictions, and homelessness, as it looks a little thin. My first question is, what is the total new spend for treatment facilities such as RAM clinics or the Bruce or Ann Oak recovery centers, and where would it be found in the supplement here? Thank you.
I would just like to gently remind all members that in the committee we are not permitted to use exhibits, so holding materials up and referring to them and their content would be considered an exhibit. So we need to refrain from that moving forward. Thank you. The Honourable Minister.
So, well, my team is putting together answers to that question that member has asked. I just want to put some facts on the record that the member had put on the record with his opening statement. He had put on the record that we had put, I can't remember what the number was, $21,000 or $21,000 was invested in Oak Tree Towers. I want to let the member know that in fact it was $4.2 million that has been invested into Oak Tree Towers since we took government. Under the former government, there was a 87% reduction in maintenance in Manitoba housing, which left Manitobans feeling unsafe, left Manitobans with less security, which left Manitobans without tenant support services, which left Manitobans without the security that they needed. Security guards were let go, tenant service coordinators were let go, people were being fired, people were, staff were fearful of their jobs. The former government was selling off social and affordable housing. It took seconds to sell. There were hundreds of units sold under the former government, and you know, we're playing catch up under our government, and we've made generational investments. We're seeing, you know, folks get housed with the proper supports that they needed so desperately under the failed former government. I want to, you know, bring the attention, and I'll update this committee. The numbers today that we've housed. We've actually housed 217 folks out of encampments. These are 217 Manitobans who under the former government left without housing, without proper supports. You know, these were folks who needed mental health supports, who needed addiction supports, who needed safe and dignified housing. And members across, you know, under the failed government didn't, you know, provide those services. Instead, they were focused on slashing and reducing staffing, reducing security for folks and leaving them in unsafe conditions. When I took over this role as minister and I toured Manitoba Housing, I felt like, and I've said this, you know, many times, I felt like I was in Detroit. The level of graffiti in the building as soon as you walked in, people were coming out to me from units saying like, they didn't even want to come out of their units, they felt so unsafe. And as I was meeting with these folks and listening to them, and as we were you know, meeting as a team and strategizing how we were going to turn this around, and the amount of work that it was going to take to get this back on track and get the safety and security of our buildings that, you know, were left in disrepair, that were boarded up when families needed housing, when quite frankly people were left out on the street without any, you know, support. And, you know, members across the way have the audacity to say that, you know, we are not providing, you know, housing. They didn't build one single social housing unit under their government. They didn't, they sold off housing. They fired workers. They fired security guards. They didn't invest in housing until their last year because they were so desperate to keep government. But that didn't work. Manitobans weren't fooled by that. They knew that they'd already did damage under their 7 years before that. So Manitobans won't be fooled, you know, by them any in what they're saying, because they know that we're doing the work. We've housed 217 people. We put over 2,000 units back online that they took offline and boarded up, and we put families into those units.
The member for Portage La Prairie.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I'm wondering if the minister is apologizing for her department, since she's saying that the FIPA that was received was inaccurate, especially since it took the intervention of the Ombudsman's office to get the office to meet the legal requirements for FIPA. I also want to mention, when we're talking about Manitoba housing units, I can talk about two specifically in my own constituency. One that I spent a tremendous amount of time at was Oak Tree Towers. This was a building where the minister was often invited out to our meetings that we had. We still continue to have meetings out there. There was a number of drug dealers that were living in the apartment. I can call them drug dealers because that's what the RCMP was calling them. The front door of the building was broken so many times that they finally, after our recommendations, put in a glass or a plastic that couldn't be broken so that people could feel a little more secure. There was people that were dealing drugs in the building, and we know that because we know that's why they were thrown out. The RCMP were there on a daily basis, along with the community safety officers, which again, they could have been doing other things with. Again, there was no services for these people. There was nowhere for them to go. The people that were living in the building were threatened to be thrown out of the building if they kept contacting Manitoba Housing, because it was for the same things over and over. We have another apartment building in Portage La Prairie called Stevens Apartment that currently right now is sitting with a 40 to 60% vacancy rate in the building, and nobody seems to know why. There is no support for these people yelling and screaming in the Manitoba housing projects, or in the Manitoba housing buildings that are there. And again, invited time and time again. Again, the minister didn't answer the question that I asked, so I will ask it once again. What is the total new spend for treatment facilities such as RAM clinics or the Bruce and Ann Oak recovery centers? So what was the spend on that, and where can I find it in the supplement to the estimates and expenditures? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Miigwech, Honourable Chairperson. So the answer to that member's question, it is in the supplements in section 24.2 on page 107. So it shows the grants to organizations that delivers these services. And it is an appropriation to community organizations to deliver services. So it does show a $5.7 million in new dollars for treatment spaces. And again, we are increasing and supporting and meeting people where they're at. I want to go back to security in properties and what's being done. So we're improving the safety and well-being of tenants and employees. That's been a priority for our government since we took government. We heard that from tenants when we visited the buildings. When we took government, we were receiving numerous emails, phone calls from residents, from employees. The staff turnover was so high because they were fearful of working in these buildings because the previous government was not resourcing these buildings properly. In fact, they were telling the people who were working there that they have to evict people immediately. There was a housing shortage, and they were telling them that if there were more than one family, and we often know that families, especially Indigenous families, will live as more than one family unit. And under a housing crisis, we know that we can't simply just, kick people out, that we have to work with them. And if they aren't causing issue and the other family is okay with, their cousin living with them or their aunt living with them, or in fact their grandmother or even their mother, because intergenerationally that's how we support one another. But under the former government, what was happening is someone was staying with them over 30 days, they were issuing eviction notices. We changed that practice and we said, we know we have a housing crisis, and in fact what we'd like to do is work with tenants, and if tenants are okay with someone living with them, and they're not causing any issue in the units, then we will in fact work with them to ensure that that is okay. And we will work to ensure if there are, bigger units, that we can move them to a bigger unit if we can, because we have a national housing crisis. And, the former failed government put us further behind, in fact, selling off housing, not supporting people well, putting them further into their addictions. When I was in the Critic, all 4 shelters are in my riding. I would often visit there and I would see, Jeff, I'm going to use just somebody's name. They would get housed, I'd come back there 6 months later, and Jeff would be back there, and I'd say to Jeff, why are you back? And he'd say, well, I didn't get the proper supports I needed to stay housed. And we were, gathering this information, and then I'd come back and I'd see, another person that was back there, and I'd say, I didn't get my mental health needs met. And so we quickly were starting to gather all this information, and when we came into government, we knew that all this was interconnected, and we needed to create a department so that we could support people well and support them along a continuum so that they can be properly supported, not in their homes, and not just give them 4 walls, but help them to be well in their homes, but onto a path of success. Whether that's getting their mental health diagnosis, whether that's getting their addictions, met, whether that's reuniting them with their families, whether that's helping them get into programs. We're in this budget, we're investing $2.5 million into adult education because we know that people want to go back to school and get into programs. And that's the kind of work that this government is doing. We recognize that people want to move and get out of the circumstances that the previous government put them in. And we're going to continue to do that work because we're listening to Manitobans.
The member for Portage-La Prairie.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. The minister recently told the media the first thing that she did on taking office was to throw out a stack of eviction notices. Is it this policy shift why I've heard from countless Manitobans and countless Manitobans living in Manitoba housing who feel like violent criminals are allowed to run the buildings and there are no consequences for offenders? What message does this send to Manitobans who want to feel safe in their own homes? And I ask that question because that's exactly what was going on in the Manitoba Housing Unit in Portage-La Prairie that I refer to as Oak Tree Towers. There was people in there. There was everything from prostitution. There was stolen goods being broken down, including bicycles. There was, again, this is information that I had received from both the community safety officers as well as the RCMP. There was the smell of drugs cooking in some of the apartments. So again, I'll ask that question. Is this policy shift why I have heard of countless Manitobans who feel like violent criminals are allowed to run the buildings and there are no consequences for these offenders? The RCMP, time after time in Portage-La Prairie, There was even other people involved that were trying to get rid of these people, but couldn't. And there was no criterion for who was taken in. It was just, if they needed a place to stay, that's where they could stay. And again, we all want to see people housed, but we all want to see them with the proper services that are needed for them. So again, I'll ask the minister that question, if that was, if the eviction notices to throw everybody out was a policy shift.
The Honourable Minister.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. So first, I'm going to give you a correction from the supplements because we thought you were looking at a different book. So correction just on the page of 107 where it shows the grants to organizations that deliver these services. So it's actually in that supplement book that you have on page 37 and page 46. So just a correction, it's not on 107. In terms of Stevens is a sponsored, managed building, and right now we aren't tenanting new folks into the building because we are doing a full refresh on that building. Again, former government did not do renovations on buildings. They left them in disrepair, and there is lots of repairs that need to be done on that building. So again, we are making sure that we are keeping buildings in good repair and that we are providing safe housing that is dignified for folks. Again, when I came into this portfolio, I went into buildings that I spent time as a youth in poverty, and I lived in some pretty run-down houses, but to say that I've ever lived in something like that, I never have. And I've never been in something like that, and people were living in that, and the former government was allowing people to live in that, and I was ashamed. I have to say I was ashamed that the former government would allow people to live like that. But we're not doing that. We're going to ensure that we are fixing up what we, Manitobans invested in, and that's our investment, and we're going to continue to ensure that they don't go into derelict conditions. So let's talk about some language here that the member has used. So the member has used projects to talk about housing. These aren't housing projects. These are people's places of residence. These aren't housing projects. We're not talking about, these are people's places of residence. Language matters. You are, essentially undignifying people's places of residence and saying that they live in projects. You know how undignifying that you are saying to folks? Like, these are folks that deserve safe, dignified living. And, for you to use language, for the member to use language like that is not okay. So I'd ask that member to withdraw and, apologize for using language like that. Housing is housing is housing, no matter where they live and what they live in. And we are our government is building mixed market housing so that you do not know what or who is living in that housing regardless of your income. The second point I want to raise is that member referred to people who are sexually exploited
Yes.
as prostitutes. Nobody wants to be in that.
Agreed.
Then I would ask that member to withdraw that language. Because again, these are people who are sexually exploited. These are folks who do not, want to be in these circumstances. Trauma has led to some of these folks being in these circumstances. And we need to put resources in place so people aren't having to do, these kinds of work. So again, language matters. I'm going to go back to, Point Douglas, and you talked about in your opening remarks that we were kicking folks out of places. So
Apologize, Honourable Minister. Just a reminder, comments need to be made through the chair, and I'd kindly ask for the background conversations and interjections to cease when it's not the member that has the floor. Thank you. The Honourable Minister.
Miigwech, I thank you for that interjection, Honourable Speaker. So in the opening comments of the member, he referred to people being kicked out. Kicked out of where? In our government, we do take, criminality in our buildings seriously. We are working with Winnipeg Police, RCMP. We do work through the RTB process. And if there is criminality in our buildings, we do issue eviction notices. And safety and security in our buildings is number one. And, for that member, to say that that is not the case is false. And we have been working tirelessly to get our buildings under control, something that the members opposite created.
The member for Portage La Prairie.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I just want to point out while we're here, we need to get some questions answered. And we haven't had any of that, that we've heard any answers to any of these questions. Regarding the Stevens apartment in Portage La Prairie, which I've been in a number of times, I've been through a number of these apartments. There is a tremendous amount of like I said, vacancy in those apartments. To the people that are running the apartment or renting out the apartment have told me over and over that they have been asking this government when those apartments will be refurbished, when they will be going through these changes, when they will be able to have people live in them. So if the minister could answer, so I can let my constituents know, the Stevens apartments in Portage La Prairie, when will the refurbishing start? And when will those apartments be able to be lived in again? As we are seeing from what we heard in the media yesterday, that the amount of homeless people in Manitoba is at record levels right now. None of us want to see people uninhabited. We want to see people taken care of. We want to see people have the proper services. But again, my question to the minister is, can the minister let us know when the Manitoba Housing building that is being looked after by somebody else in Portage La Prairie, referred to as the Stevens apartment, that the third party has been asking for to be refurbished, when will that start?
The Honourable Minister.
Miigwech, Honourable Speaker. So I did let the member know that, the Stevens apartment is third-party managed and that it was going through a deep refresh. Communications with the tenants has happened. It's approximately $13.4 million is going to be put into interior and exterior upgrades. That work is going to start in 26-27, and it'll take approximately 1.5 years if everything goes as planned. It'll also include mechanical and electrical systems that need to be upgraded. The design and drawings are underway. And again, holding vacancies is about minimizing disruptions once repairs start. We can't tenant, these apartments and then move people. That's disrupting, people's ecosystems, just like the members opposite did when they, didn't support folks at Lyons Manor when seniors were begging the former government to support them when that building got sold off. Just like 385 Smith, when that building got sold off and all those tenants had to move out. And I'll add that many of those went into encampments, went into shelter, and then later into encampments. Many of whom I spoke to that later, unfortunately, due to their own safety, had to stay up all night, got deeper into addictions because of their own safety, and didn't have a government that supported them. Didn't have a government who, provided safe housing that, took seconds to sell. And that was, getting rid of Manitoba Housing, which is a crown jewel, which is the only way that we can, ensure that we are providing rent geared to income, true rent geared to income as a government. And we have, we have that responsibility. So I just got a confirmation that construction will begin in fall of 2026 at the Stevens apartment. And that's something that we should celebrate, that we are, investing in the crown jewel of Manitoba Housing to ensure that, electrical is being upgraded, that, these folks are going to have a beautiful new apartment to come back to, the exterior and the interiors, that the mechanical systems are being upgraded. Something that, the previous government didn't do in many of these buildings. And now our government is having to, play catch up and bring these buildings up to code and ensure that Manitobans have what they should have always had, a beautiful apartment to live in, a safe apartment to live in, to, have staff that support them in a way that, is conducive to having an ecosystem where everyone can come out of their apartment and say hi to their neighbors and feel safe and have a common space where they can gather. But under the former government, that wasn't the case. People wouldn't come out of their apartments because the former government, they fired security guards. They fired staff. They were telling staff that they had to turn the work around that they were doing instead of building community, evict people. And, we've turned that around. Yes, and I said, we are still working with RCMP and Winnipeg Police. When there is a criminal matter, we are evicting people because we are tough on crime and we are tough on the proceeds of crime. And we are keeping our buildings safe and secure and ensuring that, people that are living in our buildings have a safe environment and they can build an ecosystem where they can, build a community, unlike the former government who cut, slashed, and didn't value community and the ecosystems that were built there.
The member for Portage La Prairie.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I just want to refer back to the minister's comments a few minutes ago about some of the language that I was using. The language I was using was the language that I heard from the RCMP and also the CSOs there. I do want to ask, when it does come to, and Stephen's apartment, because it is in my constituency, I was just there last week, and the third party, the third party that is looking after it took me into some of the apartments that are sitting vacant and empty. They look fine. Could the minister let us know what repairs are required in those buildings and why nobody can live in them at this time? Again, that was why the third party took me in there, because they were saying at the time to me that they thought that some of these places were able to be lived in. I'm not saying all, but some of them were that they took me into. I'm not sure why there wasn't somebody living in them. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
Miigwech, Honourable Speaker. Language does matter, and as a teacher, when I was teaching, I was a role model in front of a classroom, and I modeled what I wanted my students to be like. And we, in the last couple of weeks, learned that the leader of the opposition, who the member opposite sits beside, lied in the House. And, the member had an opportunity to stand up and be a bigger person. And again, that member talks about this was the RCMP's language. That member has an opportunity to change that language and be that bigger person. So I, again, through the chair, would invite that member to correct, the RCMP's language. I often do that. I go and
Just like to remind all members, we are not permitted to use the word lied in the chamber or in the committee room. So I'll just kindly ask the minister to withdraw that statement. The Honourable Minister.
Withdrawn. So we heard earlier in the week that there was, someone said they didn't say something, and we know that that was untrue. And we know that because the recording came out, and the member sits beside that member in the House, and that member had an opportunity to correct the record and, you know, not stand beside that person who said something that was untrue. And again, I want to just say that as an educator, you know, when I see something that is not right, that I'm not a bystander, that I'm an upstander, that I've in the past gone and done culturally relevant training for RCMP. And I've talked to them about language, and that language is important. And when we talk about anti-racism, you know, training, this is important. And you are a leader. You are an MLA for, you know, your constituent, but you're an MLA for all of the province, and you have an opportunity. So I'm going to preference that, and then I'm going to just go back to Stevens again.
I'd just like to remind all folks that we need to have all comments and questions directed through the chair. The Honourable Minister.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to Stevens now, and Stevens needs a lot of repairs. Again, it's exterior, interior upgrades, and I would ask that member, you know, in that former failed government, why they didn't do the work on this apartment, you know, years ago when it was needed. This apartment is 30, 40 years old. Could have, you know, had the mechanical and electrical systems upgraded probably years ago, but we're having to come behind and do the work that should have been done years ago. Do we want to put people in these apartments and then have to uproot them and move them? And again, I used the, you know, the example of Lyons Manor. That was a 55-plus building. That ecosystem was disrupted because the former government didn't, you know, get involved and help support those seniors. That's no longer a 55-plus building. That ecosystem's been disrupted. Those folks have, you know, moved in various places because they can't afford that rent because the former government didn't intervene and help those folks. We will not be putting folks into a building where we're going to have to uproot them in the fall of next year, the fall of this year, and have to move them. So for that member to say, to put people in there and then to move them again is, you know, shameful. I wouldn't want to move somewhere and then have to be moved in less than a year. So I'm going to tell the member the scope of the proposed work in the next set of questions, because there's like a lot of, well, maybe I can do this in 40 seconds. So the deep refresh work includes renovation of exterior interiors, such as improved building assemblies of exterior wall finish, siding, windows, reconfiguration of studio suites to increase the number of one-bedroom suites. So again, there's a big need in Portage for one-bedroom suites. Reconfiguration of main floor suites to accessibility suites, a need in Portage for accessibility units. Interior unit and communal area upgrades, crawl space improvement, mechanical and plumbing upgrades, fire life safety upgrade. You would want that for people of Portage in that building.
The Honourable Member for Portage.
Thank you. I didn't hear in there, and maybe I missed it, or maybe it wasn't there yet, is the third party, the third party that's looking after the building, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know, please let me know, but they said the place was infested with cockroaches. Just like the current Portage Hospital is infested with cockroaches. So what I'm asking is, why the delay on into the new Portage Regional Hospital when there's cockroaches in the current Portage Hospital? So why is it okay to have people not living in Stevens apartments, but it is okay for people to be living in the current Portage Hospital that now the people will not move in there until next year at this time.
The Honourable Minister.
Miigwech, Honourable Speaker. So, that member is raising questions about pest management in hospitals. So I would urge that member to, take that question to health. That's a health-related question that's, is about the hospital. That's got nothing to do with, housing. But what I will share with that member is that, since we took government, the number of units that require treatment has gone down by over half. Under the former failed government, they were evicting people. They weren't supporting people. Under our government, we actually are supporting and helping people that have accessibility issues, that have mental health issues, that need extra supports in moving their furniture. We have folks that will come in and help support them. Under the former government, what they were doing is they were just evicting people. We're not taking that approach. We know that we need to work and support tenants and meet them where they're at. Something the former government never did. That's why we see the high numbers of people in encampments, in shelters, unsupported. We're going to continue to meet people where they're at. We're going to continue to, ensure that we're putting funds into maintaining our crown jewel, Manitoba housing, something the former government never did. They put boards on our crown jewel, and left people out in the cold, left people without services or supports. We know that from speaking and knocking on doors and listening to Manitobans that they don't want to see people in encampments. They don't want to see people unsupported. They want to see people in homes with dignified support, with, ensuring that they get mental health supports, ensuring that there's a balanced approach, unlike members opposite who are like, let's not save lives in Manitoba. Let's, leave people on the streets without any supports and let them die of overdoses. We know that Manitobans don't want that. We can't, support Manitobans without ensuring that we lead them to the supports and services that they need. And we're doing that right in our buildings, whether that's through ensuring that we're working with Manitobans that need supports because they have accessibility issues and can't move their furniture, if they do have pest management issues, whether that's they need deep refreshes in their buildings, and we're not going to continue to tenant those buildings because we don't want to disrupt an ecosystem and move them 6 months later, which the members opposite is suggesting we do. We're talking about the fall of 2026, and this member is saying, tenant that building and then disrupt them and move them out. Like, these folks need accessible units in Portage la Prairie, which our government is going to do in the Stevens building. In Portage la Prairie, they need more single units in that building, which our government is going to do in this deep refresh. They need an upgrade on fire life safety. That member doesn't want that to happen in that building. We're doing that work because the former government didn't do that work in those buildings. We're going to continue to support and meet Manitobans where they're at. We're continuing to put more housing online. Former government didn't build one single social housing unit. Only in their last year did they start putting money into maintenance because they were desperate to keep government. We're not that kind of government. We're going to support meet Manitobans where they're at because we know that we need to support them so they can get on a path of success into programs, into jobs, so they can get into market rent. We believe in Manitobans, whether they're in encampments, whether they're in shelters, whether they've been, in incarceration and they're coming out and they need another chance. We're going to help and support them wherever they're at, unlike members opposite who just say, pull your bootstraps up and, do it. We know that people need help, and Manitobans have sent us here with that direction to help and support and meet people where they're at, and we're going to do that because we believe in them.
The member for Portage la Prairie.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. So what I'm hearing here, because I'm not getting an answer on this, is the minister seems to say that they're not, or they don't want to disrupt people that are living in places like Stevens Apartments because of the cockroach issues. But it's okay to leave people living in a hospital with cockroach issues. Is that what you're supporting? That it is okay to have a double standard, that it's okay for cockroaches to be in hospitals, like which is currently in the Portage General Hospital right now, and we don't want to move people out of there to get them away from these cockroaches until this year at next year at this time, according to this government. But where there's an apartment with cockroaches, they should be treated differently, and those cockroaches should be ridden of immediately. And yet we leave people that could be lying in bed dying in a hospital where there's cockroaches in the hospital. Is that correct? Yes or no?
Just a reminder to all members that we need to make sure all comments and questions are through the chair. And we've strayed a little bit away from the matter at hand today. The topic is the housing, addictions, and homelessness. And so we just ask the member to rephrase the question in a manner that's directly related to this portfolio. Thank you. The honourable member for Portage La Prairie.
Why is there a stark difference in the different departments in government regarding this issue?
What we are needing here is for the questions to be tied back to the estimates specifically, not just the department as a whole. So the estimates is the matter at hand here today. So something in the estimates book that was made reference to earlier. Thank you. The honourable member for Portage La Prairie.
We'll move on from this. We were talking about cockroaches in apartments, and I was asking about cockroaches in in hospitals. And again, it's still a pest. And the only reason I said that is there's different departments. So why is one department treating it different than others? I'll move on to my next question, which is, what is the total new spend for drug consumption?
The honourable minister.
Miigwech, Honourable Chair. I would ask for clarification on that question. The member asked for what is the spend on drug consumption? Is that member referring to what is the government investing into a supervised consumption site? And again, we can't put a dollar figure on saving lives. There has been no lives lost in any supervised consumption site in all of Canada. And I would point that member to the data that's on the Canadian website. We know that Manitoba is taking a four-pillared approach, which is harm reduction so that we can lead people to treatment and recovery. We're taking a balanced approach when it comes to enforcement. We're tough on crime, tough on the proceeds of crime. We're standing up a meth task force. We have the meth, the top person working on that's, working on the meth task force and ensuring that we are taking these drugs off of the streets. And there's been, some high-level drug busts that have happened in the community lately, and I really want to uplift the work that's been done on the front lines, whether that's RCMP or Winnipeg Police, and ensuring that these, toxic drugs are getting off the streets. We all want the same thing, right? We all want to keep our community safe. We all want to keep our kids safe. We all want to make sure that these toxic drugs are getting off the street. And I think we can say we're all on the same team when it comes to that. We want to keep Manitobans alive, and we want to ensure that we're educating Manitobans, which is why we've invested into the school nutrition program, and we're even going further than that in this new budget. We're ensuring that kids are getting onto buses free, so that transit isn't an issue in how kids are getting to school. Some families can't afford a school bus. I lived in quite away from school, and when my kids were when they were in middle school, school bus was free. But then when they went into high school, I now had to pay for a school bus. So, parents can't always afford that. So this is ensuring that kids can get to school free on transit. We're ensuring that parents can also get free daycare as well. And this is, going to be in some of our Manitoba housing buildings, and ensuring that when we're building with that in mind. We have mixed market units that are being built with daycares that are going to be in there. So again, it's transformative work that is taking a whole of government approach, and we are ensuring that we are making investments that are going to be generational. I was talking to Federal Minister Chartrand the other day, and we were talking about generational change, and what is it going to take, and how are we going to do it, and just the big tackle.
The member for Portage La Prairie on a point of order.
Point of order on, we're talking about housing. So, am I okay to go ahead, sir? Point of order on, we're talking here about housing and homelessness, and we're talking about school nutrition and that. So that is my point of order. And bring it back to the relevance of what we're here to discuss today, which was my question regarding the drug consumption site.
The minister on the same point of order.
Miigwech, Honourable Speaker. The point of order is, out of order in terms of we are taking a four-pillared balanced approach, and education is part of that approach. And I know that member is referring to transit, and getting kids to school is part of the education part of that. And schools are a part of education, and ensuring that kids are, getting to school, graduating is, a part of the whole of government approach.
So I thank all members for your comments. This is not a point of order within the allotted 5 minutes per member for speaking and their contributions. From both sides, we allow a little bit of variance and leeway and hope that all members draw it back before the end of their speaking point. We would get absolutely nothing accomplished here if we interjected at every point in time. So I will now re-address the Minister for the response, the Honourable Minister.
Miigwech, thank you so much, Honourable Speaker. And as I was saying, we take a four-pillared approach, and the last pillar I was talking about was education and ensuring that we are getting kids to school, that they're graduating on time, and that we have, many tools in the toolbox to ensure that, where we are taking a balanced approach, whether that is with adults and whether that is with youth and, whether that's with families. I want to, just turn our attention, to some great work that's being done, right across our great province, and uplift all of those organizations that are on the front lines each and every day that, aren't, trained to do the work that they're doing. I think about Main Street Project, I think about North End Women's Center, and I think that member was at committee when those folks came and spoke, and I think about Point Douglas Women's Center. Many of these organizations came and talked about having to do overdose reversals, and that's not their work, right? Their work is to support women, but they've had to, pivot and unfortunately support people. And that's why it's so important that we open up a supervised consumption site so that we can lead these folks that are unsupervised in the community to these supports, so that we can get them connected with the resources that they so desperately need for so long. Under the former government, they had a premier who threw a report on the floor that made the recommendation that a supervised consumption be opened. They had a minister that said that they went to Vancouver and visited a supervised consumption site and never even went inside, went and gawked at people outside. How shameful. And I'll continue on that line in my next question, or my next answer.
The honourable member for Portage la Prairie.
May we take a 5-minute break?
Is it agreed by all members that we take a 5-minute recess?
Agreed.
Okay. The committee will now recess. We're starting the 5-minute clock now. Will the Committee of Supply please come back to order? The Honourable Member for Portage La Prairie.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, or Honourable Chair, I'm sorry. The Minister alarmed me just now when she said she doesn't know how much her government is spending on drug consumption. Is that because of all the programs the Minister is funding, but not being open with Manitobans about, like the secret safe supply program Main Street project is providing? What provincial funding is being used to facilitate that organization and their program of literally giving drugs out to Manitobans?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. And I did ask that member to clarify his question. So I didn't know what that member was referring to. He referred to drug. I don't remember even what that member was referring to, but I asked him to clarify whether it was a supervised consumption site, that if that was what he was asking, what the funding was, allocated for. So I will give him two numbers. The first is for MOPS, which is Mobile Overdose Prevention Site. So that is $830,000 for 25-26. And I know that member has spoken about in proximity of where that mobile site does park. In January 2025, there were 10 overdoses at Logan and Maine within a 45-minute span due to a particularly toxic batch of street drugs. We're still seeing that toxic drug supply out there. That mobile overdose prevention work that they do is based on where they're seeing overdoses happening, and they're responding to ensure that people are getting supports and services that they need so that people aren't losing their lives in the absence of a supervised consumption site. I want to uplift them for the work that they're doing. These are folks that, again, the failed former government didn't provide funding for. When we got into government, we supported these folks because we know how valuable the work is that they do. They are on the front line supporting, meeting people where they're at, helping to save lives, but they're not only doing that. They are, when someone presents and says, I need supports and services, they are leading them to those supports and services. In fact, they've helped house numerous amounts of people and get them stabilized. Sunshine House does incredible work. They're one of our wraparound support providers. They are working with our 2S LGBTQIA folks and ensuring folks that are in encampments under the failed government didn't support into housing. We're ensuring that there are, many types of housing for folks. And this is an amazing service provider that is doing incredible work to support and ensure that people are properly supported. So I just want to uplift those folks and just, I can't speak highly enough about the work that they do to support and meet people at where they're at. As far as the supervised consumption site goes, we have spent $0 on operations. As the member knows, we are working on opening up that site. And again, it's about supporting, meeting people where they're at, but more importantly, getting them onto a path of recovery. You can't get people onto a path of recovery if the supports and services aren't there and you're not providing and leading them to someone who can build relationships with them. Right now, we're seeing people use unsupported, unsupervised in businesses, on the street, in parks, in playgrounds, where kids are, going to school. And Manitobans have told us they don't want to see this. They want to see people supported. We saw a government who threw a report on the floor. We saw a former failed minister that said they went to Vancouver and visited the site, never went in, never talked to, the service providers that were there that were providing, essential life-saving services that were medically trained to provide, these folks with services. I want to be clear that we are not providing safe supply. We've been very clear from that stance as a government that we are not providing a safe supply. And as far as Main Street project goes, that is a private funder. They received a federal grant for the machine, and we are providing zero funding for that.
The Honourable Member for Portage La Prairie.
So Just again, I just want to let the minister know where I got this information from. So it was a CBC article. It was done in February of this year that Main Street Project is running a safe supply program for opioids. Again, so Main Street Project is providing drugs for people out there. Main Street Project's safe supply program provides those addicted primarily to opioids with a prescribed daily amount of opioid hydromorphone. So I'll ask the minister again if they are putting any money into this, and number two, if the minister supports what Main Street Project is doing with the safe supply of opioids.
The Honourable Minister.
Miigwech, Honourable Chair. Again, I don't know if that member's not listening, but I did say we are not doing safe supply as a government. Main Street Project received a grant for the machine. It is privately funded. And as that member introducing and reading from that article, it is prescribed. It is prescribed, medication that these folks are receiving. So again, I don't know if that member, is, supporting folks in getting prescriptions. Like I'm on hormone replacement therapy. I go to a doctor to receive my prescription. Like I go to a pharmacist to receive my prescription. And we know that people are on OAT. We know that people need to, receive medications. We have been very clear as a government. We are not providing safe supply. We are in full enforcement of anything illegal, whether we're tough on crime, proceeds of crime. We, are taking a harm reduction approach so that we can lead people onto a path of recovery, which is why we've invested into, treatment and recovery. But we've even gone further in terms of putting housing online and making sure that people are, properly supported, something that the previous government never did. And we can't afford to continue to leave people out in tents and allow them to, go into addictions or go deeper into addictions, which is what the former government did. And we're seeing, the aftermath of that. When we took government, almost 22,000 units had boards on them. We came in, we took those boards off. There's still more work to be done. We're doing that work. We're going to continue to do that work. We've been working with partners. We've built capacity around Indigenous partnerships. We've worked with First Nations, with our Métis, with our Inuit. We have Inuit service providers that are providing wraparound supports and housing. We have First Nations that are providing wraparound supports to First Nations urban members. We have Métis folks that are providing housing supports to, Métis members as well. And we know that, folks that are homeless or that are coming from shelters or that are at risk of becoming homeless need proper supports, and the former government didn't provide those supports. We are ensuring that we have the staffing in our buildings that are providing proper supports with tenant service coordinators. We've hired an Indigenous service community coordinator who's working with our community to, provide supports, whether that's, cultural programming. We've had some, deaths in our buildings, and we have a practice where we smudge every single unit if someone passes away. We want to ensure that, that unit, in our belief, that is smudged and it's purified, and anything, that is negative in there is brought back to positivity. And We've just done so much work that the failed government didn't do in terms of maintenance, in terms of building up, the stock of housing. We're going to continue to work with our partners and ensure that people are properly supported. And we've seen the crime rate go down. We've seen, folks in terms of having to be in survival mode. They're so thankful to have a government that is supporting them, that is providing safe, dignified living, that they can build an ecosystem where they can have a neighbor who they can talk to, that they can go to a common space that is clean, that is nice, that they can do their laundry, and they can have a security system that will respond, unlike the former government who cut all those services.
The member for Portage La Prairie.
The minister said she wasn't supporting Safe Supply. When was she made aware of this program? They aren't doing supply, they're supporting Main Street project to the tune of millions of dollars. How does the minister square the circle of funding to an organization who provides this program? Their support is condoning this program.
The Honourable Minister.
Miigwech, Honourable Chair. Again, I want to remind that member that our government is not doing safe supply, that this is a prescribed medically oversight program that, you know, is life-saving for 5 individuals, and, you know, if that member, you know, is, you know, saying that that is not a service that should be provided, you know, perhaps that they should be speaking with Main Street Project. We do not fund that program. We are a funder of the shelter, of detox, of some transitional services. They have private funders and donors, and they have some autonomy to do, you know, some other programming. And what I will say to that member is, do they not, they do some really incredible, valuable work. You know, they are sheltering hundreds of people. They're providing support services to many vulnerable folks, leading them onto a path of recovery, leading them into transitional housing, often into jobs, and out of a system and into market housing, into jobs. And some of them actually end up working at Main Street Project. And I've shared this story many times. When my mom and dad came, my dad came from Ontario, Cornwall. My mom came from her First Nation community of Pine Creek. They both ended up at Main Street Project. And, you know, it's a valuable service. My dad ended up actually working at Main Street Project, and they still continue that practice today. And so if we were to, you know, as that member saying, stop funding Main Street Project, where would these folks go? They provide valuable services. They do incredible work. They are moving people along a continuum that they've been doing for decades. I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for their work. So I want to uplift, you know, Main Street Project for the work that they're doing. And, you know, unlike members opposite, we'll continue to work and work collaboratively and work alongside and do life-saving work. That's why we're working towards opening up a supervised consumption site, because, again, it's about working in a balanced approach and leading people to treatment and recovery. And again, we are not providing funding for this service. This was a federal grant that they received. It's prescription-based, and it's got medical oversight, and they have, you know, funders and donors, and we, again, provide funding for the shelter, detox, and transitional services, and they do amazing work, and we will continue to fund, you know, the amazing work that they're doing in terms of providing shelter services, detox services, and transitional services. And, you know, if members opposite thinks that they shouldn't be funded, then he should square that circle with his constituents and tell them why they should put all those hundreds of people out on the streets and where they should go and be sheltered and get their support from.
The hour being 5 p.m., committee rise.